Wall Street bankers, they have a new scam. It's where they drive up the price of consumer goods and then they rake in billions in additional profits with a little side scam. Joining me now to talk about how these scams work and why nobody is doing anything to stop it is investigative journalist David Dayen. He's with the American Prospect. You see his stuff there. You see it on Salon.com. He's just an all-around great writer. David, tell us about the warehouse scam. How is it that Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and some of these people are now in the warehousing business of aluminum and copper and other goods such as that?
Right. So Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and some of these other investment banks have been buying up warehousing facilities of various commodities. They also, as part of their course of business, buy and sell commodity. They do commodity speculation. They buy and sell futures on commodities. Because of the way they're running their warehouses, where they are basically backing up the inventory and making sure that companies that actually need the aluminum, for example, can't get it for several months, this drives up the price of aluminum on the regular market, and it increases their profit margin on the commodities, the commodity speculation that they're doing.
Well, it's price fixing. I mean, okay, let's begin.
Yeah, it's basically price fixing.
Yeah. Where we begin is we begin with the government says that you can't do this kind of storage with a commodity like aluminum. You're not permitted to do that. So what?
Right.
My understanding.
And they weren't for a long time, but the Federal Reserve gave some waivers, basically, to investment banks to be able to purchase trading assets, in other words, the underlying companies of the same commodities that they trade in.
So what they do is create scarcity. I mean, isn't that what they do? In other words, if they're told, David, that they have, say, I forget how many days, maybe 70 days to move, that they can store the aluminum in their warehouse, don't they just back a truck up to one warehouse, move it out of that place where the time is up, move it into another warehouse, store that they just shuffle the aluminum around.
Right.
While Coca-Cola, the beer makers, automakers, everybody who relies on aluminum is being gamed because the price is going up because of scarcity. Isn't that kind of the heart of what they're doing?
Yeah, they create the illusion of scarcity. And, of course, if you're a commodity speculator and you know exactly the amount of inventory because you own the warehouses where this commodity is located, you're going to have a knowledge advantage over your fellow traders, and that's going to enable you to make very large profits in the commodity markets.
In other words, you know when you're going to release it. That's what you're saying,
exactly.
David. Okay, you
have the knowledge advantage. You have the information of how much inventory there is, where it's going to go, what it's going to do, and that gives you a serious price advantage over your competitors.
So you're creating the scarcity by playing shell games that should be illegal, by moving the storage, the aluminum in a storage house from one storage house to the other. You're holding, let's say, 2 million tons of, let's just say, aluminum. Aren't you also? The price is going up because it costs. You're charging somebody to store that aluminum every day, aren't you?
Exactly.
And so
you're
tell us about that
charging
part.
A premium. Yeah. You're charging a premium to the company that purchases it on the future market. In other words, they say, we're going to need this much aluminum in 2 years. So because they're spreading out that order and being late with them, they also can charge more for the storage, the premium, which is set by an international organization. So even if they own only 5% of the warehousing, that the fact that they're creating these delays is going into the factor of the premium price that's put on storage and delivery throughout the world. So it increases prices for aluminum throughout the world. Yeah, and those profits inevitably go to Goldman Sachs.
Right. They call it dark inventory or something such as that. This is happening because of Glass-Steagall is no longer there. We have in part because you have Graham Leach that says that banks, where we used to go, you go to the bank, you say, look, hold on to my money for me. I want to make some deposits. I want a checking account. Now, forget all that. Now they're stockbrokers. Now they're in the warehouse business. Now they're basically controlling the Fed. This is all about the Fed being so opaque where it comes to the average American understanding the operations of the Fed. The Fed has allowed them to do this. I mean,
right. The Fed had the ability to put a stop to this and say, if you are trading in a certain commodity, you can't own the warehousing of that commodity. And they gave exemptions, specific exemptions to various companies in secret, without any public knowledge, to these bank holding companies to allow them to have this vertical combination, which used to be called a trust, I believe, and was broken up.
Well, and then it came antitrust. I mean, there's all kinds of parts to this. This is how antitrust grows. This is how price fixing grows. This is and we have a Fed. But please tell me, give me some bit of hope that at least our administration, Obama, is not compromising on this. Please tell me that.
Well, as we know, there's a very large and controversial competition on who's going to be the next chairman of the Federal Reserve. And on one side, you have Janet Yellen, who is the current vice chair, under the consensus of which the Fed has actually looked into this, and maybe because of public pressure, they might do something about this. But the other option, who Obama seems to favor, is Larry Summers, who was active, the Treasury Secretary, when the derivatives markets were deregulated. He was the Treasury Secretary when Graham Leach Bliley, the bill that eliminated Glass-Steagall, passed. And he has been pretty consistent on the side of deregulation of these various industries.
Well, he's an Alan Greenspan. He's just an extension of Alan Greenspan.
He's a Greenspan. He's more of a Robert Rubin acolyte.
Yeah, I think even worse. You're right. Yeah, you're right.
The real key here is that the Fed is a position that is largely considered to be just about monetary policy, but it's really also about financial regulation. I mean, the Fed is probably the most powerful financial regulator in America, which makes them the most powerful one in the world.
And people don't understand how they operate, exactly. Dave. That's what's so incredible. They don't understand if you let a ghoul like Larry Summers get in control of the Fed, that right now, the only people I see even criticizing what's happening vocally, you got Sherrod Brown. He's out there saying, what in the hell are you allowing? You're causing... you're letting this organization, you're letting Goldman Sachs set the prices, not just on aluminum. They're doing this with oil. They're doing it with copper. Right. Matter of fact, power. Good example. Now I've got Rick Outzen with me. Great investigative journalism. This is what he does, just like you do. He's been following the BP part of this. Rick, this is a BP story too.
It really is. Except instead of a warehouse, they have a gas pipeline, and what they got hit with is a $28 million, almost a $29 million fine that they're having to deal with over the next 30 days because they manipulated the gas prices between their hubs and the Houston Ship Channel.
Well, there's no difference here. And, Rick, if you really think about it, they got hit with this just last year or 2 years ago, the same thing with propane, didn't they?
Right. Propane, they got hit with a $300 million fine in 2007 for dealing with rigging the propane market.
Okay, and it's easy to call BP criminals. BP is a criminal enterprise. There's no question about that in my mind. They're absolutely a criminal enterprise, and we've seen it time and time again. We don't, nobody goes to jail. Even with BP, when they, destroyed the entire Gulf of Mexico, when they killed 11 people, nobody actually goes to jail, but they are a criminal enterprise. Now, the point that Rick makes here with BP, it's just a different kind of price fixing, and that's what your story is about. You can't call it antitrust, but you can certainly call it price fixing by shuffling aluminum around, copper around, energy around, oil around, and creating a scarcity to where consumers have to pay more, and Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and all of the ghouls on Wall Street make more money. Does that get it right?
You're just rigging the markets. And when you own the physical commodity and also and you're speculating in the market for that commodity, you're just inevitably going to come up with this. Just last week, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission fined J.P. Morgan Chase almost $500 million for rigging the energy markets here in California. So this happens at many different levels, and it's all a piece of these large investment banks, mega banks, also large multinational corporations like BP, starting to own the physical infrastructure, the means by which we get very critical goods over to market.
How about water? How about water?
Off the trading of those goods.
David, how about...
You can go down the line.
Exactly. Water in South America, we're already seeing it. Listen, this is very good work on this story. It is. But what's so troubling to me is you have so few people, A, that understand the story, B, that even know what the hell the Fed is or how they work in this dark, shadowed world, and C, that can get it out there and tell people this is why you pay more for your car. This is why you pay more for goods that use aluminum of every kind. This is why, because you have thugs on Wall Street like Goldman Sachs doing these things, and you have an administration that's letting them do that. Now, real quick question that we got to close. Has there been enough pushback with Larry Summers to where this president will stop his ridiculous, foolish defense of Larry Summers?
I don't think there's been pushback enough. I think that Summers is very much in the equation as the potential next Federal Reserve chair, even though a third of Senate Democrats sent a letter to the president saying that Janet Yellen is their choice, even though economists have come out and said Janet Yellen is more qualified for the job. She's actually worked at the Federal Reserve. She actually has views on monetary policy over the last 20 years. But Summers seems like the guy, and he seems like the guy because he's worked with all these people in the White House, and he's their guy. And there's a very gender-specific campaign that's being waged against Janet Yellen that says she's not tough enough or she doesn't have the gravitas to be the Federal Reserve chair, and it's insidious, and we should fight back against it.
And she's not thuggish enough like Larry Summers. And for this president to be out with his full-throated defense of Larry Summers is absolutely deplorable.